Good evening. Welcome to KIXE TV presents In Discussion Proposition 50, also carried on the YouTube channel at KRCR TV. I'm here tonight with the CEO of Green Retirement and the chair of the Democratic Central Committee of Shasta County, Rose Penelope Yee. Thank you for being here, Rose. And also Shasta County 4th District Supervisor Matt Plummer. First, I want to lay out a little bit what we're going to be talking about tonight. Right now, we have a conversation about Proposition 50. The goal tonight is to understand the redistricting process and consider the arguments for and against Prop 50. It's on the ballot for November 4th, and it would replace California's current congressional district maps with new legislative drawn maps. And the total number of districts, though, would not change. Currently, an independent commission is responsible for redistricting in the state of California. The commission includes 14 members, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 4 members who are not registered with either of those political parties. Districts are evaluated every 10 years after the national census. Prop 50 would allow voters to, rather than the commission, to determine the districts until the 2030 census through ballot measures, and then it returns to the commission after that. So, I want to start off first by asking each of you for an opening statement, and I'd say I'd flip a coin as to who goes first, but nobody ever carries cash anymore. I don't know. Penelope, why don't you go first, Rose?
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike, for moderating. Thank you, Rob, for hosting. And thank you, Matt, for joining me in this conversation on Prop 50. So, ladies and gentlemen, Prop 50 is California's principal response to a blatant power grab by President Trump when he asked Texas Governor Abbott to give him 5 more Republican seats in Congress. It was about rigging the game and locking in political power. But why did the president feel that he needed to do it? He felt he needed to do it because his policies have been very unpopular. His economic policies have squeezed the American people. Our purchasing power has steadily dwindled. Households are crushed with heavy debt, and we are losing hospitals and healthcare. So, understandably, the voters are angry, and Trump is afraid that Republican control of Congress is endangered, and so he turned to gerrymandering. But we here in California are now faced with a choice. Do we just sit back and let that happen? Or do we fight? Do we stand up for our democracy? Prop 50 is a temporary measure. It is our way of making sure that the playing field is even. So Prop 50 is temporary. It's not about left or right. It's about fairness versus corrupt manipulation. It's our democracy at stake, and Prop 50 is fighting for it.
Thank you, Rose. Matt.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here. Great to be with you, Rose. I want to describe 3 main reasons why I believe you should be, especially if you're in Shasta County or Modoc or Siskiyou or anywhere in Northern California, why you should be against Prop 50. And the first comes to fairness. I mean, we're talking about kind of exacting retribution on a national political figure, but I think when we should be focused on what does representation and fair representation look like at the local level and at the state level. And right now, so California has 52 members of Congress. Right now, 43 of them are Democrats. So that is, I believe, if I did the math right, around 90%, right? Or maybe 80 to 90%. Right now, though, if you look at the party registration, there's less than 2 times that number of Democrats than there are Republicans. So when we look at Congress in California is already way overrepresented by Democrats. So that's number one. Second, if you look at the vote of Trump, who Rose was talking about many don't like, he got 38% of the vote, while Kamala got 58% of the vote. So you would expect that the members of Congress would have a roughly equal proportion of that. Instead, this will move it to 48 out of 52 congressional representatives are going to likely be Democrats, and that will be 92% of all of them, which is way out of whack with what we see in the state. Now let's talk about Shasta County. This will dramatically change the game for Shasta County, and I'll talk about this more, but there will be, in just 2 counties, Marin and Sonoma, more registered Democrats than there are Republicans in the whole District 2 if this passes, which will dramatically change representation locally.
Thank you, Matt. Rose, your rebuttal to Matt.
So friends, when a big, powerful bully keeps hitting you economically, politically, do you just cower and cry? No, you fight. And that is what Prop 50 is all about. When Texas Governor Abbott decided to heed President Trump's call and gerrymandered Texas, that was hijacking our democracy. And when a state chooses to hijack Congress, it's not just Texas that is affected. It's all of us. It's all of us here in California. It's not just our district that's at stake. It's representation for all of us here in California. So this is not just a district-wide representation battle. This is a battle for the whole of California. And that's what Prop 50 is all about.
Thank you, Rose. Matt, your rebuttal to Rose.
Yeah, those who support Proposition 50 are attempting to, say, balance the scales nationally while throwing the scales way out of whack in California. And so on one hand, they think it's so important that we spend $250 million on a special election to try to right the scales at the national level when they have no concern about throwing the scale way off at the state and local level. That doesn't make sense. If we are going to operate in an environment where there's a heightened political environment, we don't win by abandoning our principles as soon as there's a threat to them. We win by sticking to them in the midst of that and demonstrating a better way to lead and a better way to govern in the future. And that's the way that ultimately those principles will preserve.
Thanks, Matt. I'm going to stay with you now so we can kind of flip-flop back and forth going first and second. So your thoughts on the current redistricting system that Prop 50 would address?
I think the current system is actually quite brilliant. So the fact that there is balance between the parties, the fact that it's done by an independent commission. So one, you shouldn't be able to make decisions that benefit you. And what we see through Proposition 50 is that state legislatures, who often transition into Congress, that's the natural political progression, are now able to draw maps that predict and benefit their future career. And that is something I've spoken out against locally, that supervisors shouldn't be able to give themselves a raise. As elected officials, we're here to serve. We shouldn't be able to make decisions that benefit us in the future. And that's what's happening right now if we move to Prop 50. So the independent commission, which at first people were a little uncertain about it when it passed in 2010, but if you look at when it was next brought before the voters, there was increasing popularity because people believe that having someone outside of the system who can't benefit from it is the way to go. And the last thing I'll just say on that is that this is a model for how we do elections. When there's a manual vote tally, we ensure that it's a group of folks from from different parties so that there's a balance to that.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, I can ask you the question again if you like. Your thoughts on the current redistricting system that Prop 50 would address?
Well, I totally agree that our independent redistricting commission is a gold standard. And that is why Prop 50 actually calls for a nationwide independent redistricting process. But what we are now faced with is really extraordinary. It is unprecedented that we have a sitting president who asks for 5 more Republican seats in Congress. So what is at stake here is representation for our whole nation. It's for all of us Americans. It's not just for residents of Shasta County. It's not just residents of Congressional District 1. It's not just residents of California. What we're fighting for is America. It's American Congress, and that's what we need to keep our eye on.
Thank you, Rose. And now it's your turn to go first. So we're talking about gerrymandering here. I don't think there's any argument that that's going on, both in California and Texas, and perhaps other states will follow. To define it, though, a little bit, it's the strategic drawing of district boundaries to increase the likelihood of future electoral success for one or more parties. So, your opinion in this case, in California?
So, Prop 50 is really a response to the gerrymandering that was initiated in Texas and other Republican states. But what is the real problem here? The real problem is that across our country, we have a gang of billionaires and their lobbyists that are trying to reshape our political process. And we know what their agenda is. Their agenda includes spending billions on foreign wars. In fact, it includes additional billions to Netanyahu, who is now conducting genocide in Gaza. Their agenda is stripping Americans of health care. Their agenda is suppressing free speech and dissent. That is what we're fighting for here. We're fighting against this agenda that is going to suppress Americans' way of life and living. And so Prop 50, by voting yes on Prop 50, we're standing up for the American way of life. We're standing up for democracy.
Thank you. And Matt, your opinion on gerrymandering in California?
Yeah, so I think gerrymandering is unequivocally wrong, and that we shouldn't justify it by saying, well, someone else did it first, so we should do it. And if we want to talk about billionaires influencing American politics, it's interesting that the top funder of the support for Proposition 50 is the George Soros Fund, right? So that's pretty interesting in terms of billionaires stepping into American politics to influence it. But we know that when it comes to abiding by our principles, that we see this game play out and we say, oh, it's just temporary, right? But that's not what we've seen. Look at what happened in Congress when they decided, okay, we're going to suspend the filibuster for a little bit for low-level judicial nominees. Well, that was the Democrats who did that, right, in 2013. What happens in 2017? Then the Republicans say, well, you did it first, so now we're going to take it to Supreme Court nominees. And then what happened in 2024 during the presidential election? There was all this conversation by primarily Democratic presidential contenders of abandoning the filibuster altogether. This is the natural progression if someone escalates and retaliates, is they take it to another level and it erodes the very system that we have that undermines our democracy. And the last thing I'll say is that I think it's actually a mockery that they put both the redistricting and the call for a national commission to have an independent commission on the same ballot. It's saying, don't do what we're doing, do what we're saying to do. And honestly, this is really distressing because this is what California is known for. Look at what happened during COVID when the same people who were calling for lockdowns were sitting at the French Laundry eating. It's that same hypocrisy that riled the American public and the California voters then, and it's happening again.
And we've been kind of touching on this all along, but gerrymandering in and of itself, is it fair?
No, it's not fair, and that's why it should never be in the hands of the politicians, because they will, by definition, take action to perpetuate their own careers. Unfortunately, politicians want to get reelected, and so they will act in that way. So we need to take it out of their hands and put it into a different entity.
Is gerrymandering fair?
Gerrymandering is not fair. Redistricting should be, I agree, in the hands of an independent commission, which is why Prop 50 is calling for it. But again, we are faced with extraordinary circumstance. We are faced with a president who wants to grab and continue to be in power in perpetuity. And what are the consequences of that? It's way beyond just Shasta County having a vote in Prop 50. It is one party working to entrench itself in power. We need to fight this abuse, and Prop 50 is one way that we're fighting it.
So, Rose, what do you see as the long-term consequences if voters do approve or reject Prop 50?
So there really is no long-term, I would say, effects of voters approving Prop 50. And that is because Prop 50 is temporary. It only applies to 2026, 2028, and 2030 elections, after which it will revert back to the independent commission. So that really addresses Matt's point about he was afraid that it will continue. No, it will not, because Prop 50 in essence stops in 2030.
Matt, long, short-term consequences of Prop.
Yeah, there's three significant consequences that we should not be willing to entertain. The first is that if California does this, we know a number of other states will do it. And that's the way we've seen in politics over the last 4 years, that California moves, and there's a number of other Democratic-led states that will move in conjunction with that. And so we're going to set off a whole round of gerrymandering, which will waste resources on unnecessary elections and disrupt the balance in every state around the country. So that's number one. Number two, once we justify it saying, well, this is an exceptional circumstance, then at any point in the future that the state legislature says, well, now we're in an exceptional circumstance, then they can just go back and say, well, we're gonna abandon it for a little bit again because we need to, because of this or that. And so it's setting a precedent that whenever politicians want to change the balance or aren't happy with what's happening in other places, that they can go and just change things to fit and match their rules. And then the third thing, and this is for me as a Shasta County supervisor, one of the most important, is that it's going to change representation for Shasta County and Northern California. It almost invariably is going to mean that the person representing Shasta County, Modoc County, Siskiyou County is going to come from Marin or Sonoma County, just based on population alone. And that means that those folks who, they could be great people, but they don't understand the rural Northern California. They, Marin County is only 12% registered Republican versus 50% in Shasta County. And so ideologically, values-wise, we're gonna have very different representation here, so that when we go to our congressmen, and here's the last thing I'll say, they, when they're running, won't even feel a need to come up here. And we see that with statewide candidates. They don't come here because they know they don't need the votes, and it will be the same thing. They will be unaware and ignorant of what's happening here.
Thank you. So, we'll stay with you. Got to keep track here. I got to say, it's really hard to not ask follow-up questions to both of you. I'm just so used to doing that, but we're sticking with the script here.
You set the rules, Mike.
No, I can't do that. Is redistricting reform best solved through ballot propositions or legislators or the current commission?
So I don't think California needs reform. I think the system that we have is great. But if you were to say, in general, should that reform happen through one of those three, then I think it should be the people who decide how that reform happens and ultimately get that say. And so I do think now in California also, they didn't have a choice, right? Because this independent commission was enacted through a ballot proposition, so it needs to be suspended through that same approach. So yes, I agree with the people having a voice in it, but I don't think we need reform.
So Rose, is it best solved through proposition or legislators or the current commission?
Well, right now, Prop 50 is being voted on by California voters. So contrary to what Matt said, that it is just the legislature just going to make decisions, no, it is not. It is the voters that are going to make a decision whether we are going to redistrict or not. So I want to make that clear. It is you, the voters, who are going to say yes to vote for Prop 50 or not if you don't think that it is what is needed. But again, we are in extraordinary circumstances. Our democracy is threatened. And when it is threatened, we need to use every tool that we have. And that is why California is standing up. And that is why I am here. I am here asking you to vote yes to Prop 50 because we need to defend our democracy.
Is it fairness? Is it fair to redraw these boundaries?
So what really is fairness, right? What is fairness? Is fairness getting representation? Is it getting each of us, each of our American citizens having representation in Congress? What is being done in Texas is not fair. Texas voters were not even asked, Matt, whether they should be gerrymandered or not. It was from the governor to the legislature in Texas, and they just, behind closed doors, drew the maps, didn't put it out to voter approval, and just said, this is it, we're gerrymandering. It was a direct violation of voters' rights. What's happening here in California is that the maps are open. It was shared with everyone. We can all see it. It's right there right now. You can see it on your screen. And so we can discuss it like what we're doing now. It's out in the open. And so voters can really dig down and see what's at stake. And so that is what I believe is what fair representation is about.
Thank you. Well, Matt, is it fair to redraw the district boundaries?
It's not fair to redraw them in order to score political points, and that's what we have happening here. And let me be clear, I do not support what Texas did. And I think actually by saying yes to Proposition 50, you're actually stamping approval on what Texas did. Because you said, okay, well, if they're going to do it, we're going to do it too. So we think not highly enough of our principles that we would stick to them. So we'll go along and follow your lead. That's what we're saying if we say yes on Prop 50. And so I don't think that's right. And I want to come back to something, and it's called the efficiency gap. And it's the difference between the representation in Congress and the representation of those voters. And here's the interesting thing. If you look in 2024 in Congress, there's actually a 7-member slant towards the Democrats. So if we want to talk about fairness, actually Texas' move 5 to the right would actually bring it more into a neutral position, just from pure mathematical efficiency gap there. And so that actually is moving it towards it. I still don't support it, but we are bringing it into more equality there. And so, again, and I would come back to the idea that, it's interesting, when did this independent redistricting commission start? Well, it was under Arnold Schwarzenegger. And, when Rose talks about the threat to democracy, Arnold Schwarzenegger has said that Proposition 50 is a threat to democracy. And you might say, well, of course, he's a Republican, he's doing that. He also, by the way, endorsed Kamala Harris and voted against Trump in this last election, and yet he stands by the principles that were enacted when he was in leadership.
The districts themselves, the boundaries, are those fair? You were talking about Shasta, Siskiyou, Modoc County being in with Marin County. So how fair is that?
Yeah, I think it's a real problem because in order to have representation, there are a number of factors you would want to look at. One is urban-rural mix. Rural Northern California is significantly different than urban California. And I've lived in both urban areas and rural areas. And so if you don't understand the dynamics of rural areas, and I talk with our state legislators, and they say that they often have to bring, or they bring up other legislators from urban areas to Northern California to expose them to what life is like up here. And so the idea that we're going to be represented in Congress by people who don't understand how the timber industry works, who don't understand why we have, economic shortfall and not the jobs there, that is problematic, and it means that the efficacy of that of someone representing someone in Northern California will be diminished.
So, Rose, putting Shasta, Siskiyou, Modoc counties in with Marin County, is that fair?
Well, I think that it's a fallacy to think that just because we will have drawn new districts, if Prop 50 gets approved, means that we will have a representative who is just going to be in the cosmopolitan areas of Marin. It is a fallacy because 2026 elections would open up the slate to a range of candidates. We can have candidates here in Shasta County, in Siskiyou County, in Modoc County, who can compete with those from Marin. So I don't think that we need to impute right now a representative for Shasta County that is just going to be knowledgeable about urban areas like Marin. We certainly will have the freedom to elect our representative in 2026 that can represent our county, Shasta County, Siskiyou County, Modoc County, and the rural areas of District 2 if Prop 50 passes.
Thank you. How does Prop 50 shift political influence rather than eliminate it?
So Prop 50 does not shift political influence. Prop 50 is meant to balance out Congress. So Texas grabs 5 seats. California is trying to balance it by redistricting and hoping that we will elect 5 Democrats in 2026 that will balance what Texas is doing. Because what's happening here, we have to keep in mind that this hijacking of our democracy is going to be really detrimental to our lives here in Shasta County. What is at, we need to really look at what is at stake. What is at stake is continuing billionaire control. It's continuing control of the powerful. It is not the people's voices that are going to be represented. It is the powerful elites that will keep on controlling our political system.
Thank you, Rose. So, Matt, how does Prop 50 shift in political influence rather than eliminate it?
Yeah, and I want to come back to the local dynamics because while Rose mentioned that we can certainly in Shasta County put forth a candidate to run for Congress, the problem is not whether or not we can put forth a candidate, but that it's where the population is based. And so, as I said at the very beginning, there are more Democrats, if these maps are redrawn, there are more Democrats in 2 counties. This would be an 8-county district. There are more Democrats in 2 counties than there are Republicans in all 8. And so that means that if someone's going to run and have the best chance of success, either they're going to come from that area because they already have existing relationships with funders and with voters, or they're going to spend all their time there because they know if I was a Democrat and I was running in this newly drawn map, I would spend all my time there because that would be the best and most efficient strategy to win the election. And it's just a pure mathematical game. And so what that means is that someone from Shasta County is not going to have a chance. Someone from Modoc County is not going to have a chance. And that is where the shift in political influence is going to happen. It's going to be shifted away from Northern California and towards the Bay Area. And the Bay Area already has dramatic political influence on California and the nation. Look at the past several governors of California. They're from the Bay Area. That's because when you have dense urban populations that control the majority of the vote, that is where candidates win. And it happens at the state level, and it will happen in District 2, the new Congressional District 2, if we redraw these maps.
Let's see. Can voters hold the map drawers accountable if Prop 50 passes?
Well, this is an interesting question. I mean, I don't know exactly what we mean by that, except, of course, them being state legislatures, we could vote them out the next election, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the problem, we see the same representation at the state level, right? There's a supermajority where one party has controlled California politics for 10 years, maybe 15 years. And so the idea that that is going to be changed and that there's going to be accountability for it, I think is unlikely. I think that this is our chance to hold them accountable for trying to undermine an independent redistricting commission. This is your chance. Vote no, and you will hold them accountable, saying don't grab power just because you don't like what another person is doing.
So, Rose, can voters hold the map drawers accountable if Prop 50 passes?
Well, I just want to address first the grabbing power, because the grabbing power here, Prop 50 was up because Trump and Texas Governor Abbott are grabbing power from us in Congress. And so, going back now to this question, it's kind of interesting because here in California, we are putting Proposition 50, the redistricting, before the voters. And it is open, the maps are shared, and discussions are going on like what we're doing right now. It's not hidden. It is not imposed on Californians, unlike Texas, where they just said, this is it. Voters didn't have a choice. We have a choice. So we are the ones who are accountable. If we pass Prop 50, we are the ones who we hold ourselves accountable for that.
All right, Rose, and we've been going down this path already, but how would Proposition 50 change representation for North State communities and areas?
So Prop 50 is really a statewide answer to Texas. It's not about Shasta County or even District 1, like I mentioned, but it is a statewide response to power grab by billionaires. We know what happens when billionaires have control over a country. We have private equity that will raise rents and tighten the noose around renters. We have big pharma executives who will continue to reap profits while we lose healthcare. And we have corporations that will continue underpaying their workers and prevent them from forming unions that would help them negotiate for living wages. That is what is at stake, friends. That is our way of life is at stake here. It's not just about having rural and rural portions of California being now merged with Marin County. It is about our way of life. It is about giving Trump and his billionaire buddies control of our entire political and economic system.
Thank you. Now, Matt, how would Proposition 50 change, representation for the North State communities and areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think at first it's interesting that Rose would say that this is about grabbing power from Trump because, I mean, for one, almost 40% of Californians voted for him. Secondly, if you look in Shasta County, that number gets, 65, 70% who actually support what he ran on and what he's doing for the most part. So I think the idea that all Californians and particularly Shasta County residents are against this is not consistent with what we see. The other thing, and I think this is the real concern for anyone in Shasta County who's considering voting on this, is Rose said it's not about Shasta County, and that's exactly right. Shasta County is going to suffer because we're being ignored. It isn't about Shasta County for those in Sacramento. It's about a political play for a governor who wants to run for president and is trying to build his resume of fighting back against President Trump. And that's been clear since 2024. I mean, no one disputes that. Politico writes about it. Everybody's talking about it. And so it's right. It's not about Shasta County. It's ignoring Shasta County, and it's going to hurt the North State at the benefit of someone's political resume.
All right. And does Proposition 50 move California closer to a healthier democracy, or does it create new problems?
I think it creates new problems, and I've talked about that. And I go back to Arnold Schwarzenegger's comments of he thinks it's moving it away to democracy. He thinks it's a threat to democracy, and I think democracy, ultimately, when Rose talks about, well, we should get credit because we're giving it a choice to the people. Let's be honest about that. They had to give it to the people. They didn't have the choice. If they had had the choice, they would have very likely taken it. And how do we know that? Well, look at what happened with Proposition 36, which passed in California by a 68%. 68% of Californians supported Proposition 36, which increased penalties for crimes, drug-related, and theft. So the state legislature tried 13 times to undermine that and to put a poison pill into some of the ballot initiatives and legislation. And what they are showing is a desire to undermine the vote of the people there. And let's be clear, if they could have gotten away without bringing this to the voter, then they would have done it. And that's undermining democracy at its core.
So does Proposition 50, Rose, move California closer to a healthier democracy, or does it create new problems?
So before I answer that, Mike, I want to go back to what Matt has said about my comments on Shasta County not being able to matter in this conversation. Shasta County, what I meant is that what is at stake here is not Shasta County as a county, but Shasta County residents. Our families here in Shasta County are going to suffer from the continued billionaire control of our country. One such example that we have is that due to the cuts under the Big Ugly Bill, Mayor Memorial Hospital in Fall River Mills is at risk of closure. Now, what is that going to mean for us Shasta County residents? It will mean that those residents in Fall River Mills will not have a hospital that they can go to for urgent care for emergencies. It will mean that our hospitals here in Redding, Mercy, and Shasta Regional are going to be even more overburdened. It will mean the loss of healthcare jobs. So when I talk about the fact that Prop 50 is addressing nationwide issues and not just county issues, it's because these nationwide issues have direct relevance on how we live our lives here in Shasta County.
All right, I'm going to take that as the answer to that question. Okay, we're coming up on the closing opinions now. Why should voters, or should voters not, support Proposition 50, Rose?
Okay, so voters should vote yes on Prop 50. And why do I ask you to vote yes on Prop 50? It's because we need to stand up for democracy. We need to stand up for a way of life. We need to stand up for independence. And, you know, when President Trump said, America first, what did he really mean by that? Because what I'm seeing by his America First program is that billions are now spent on foreign wars, while veterans' benefits are getting cut and seniors are afraid of losing their Social Security. It's not America first when big pharma executives are getting rich and even richer while we are losing hospitals and healthcare. It's not America first when big ag profits while we have small family farmers who are bankrupted. So America first should mean Americans first, all Americans first. It should mean a government that puts people's well-being beyond corporate greed. It is an America with a government that protects our communities, an America that guarantees opportunities, an America that restores faith in democracy. This is what we're fighting for in Prop 50. This is why we have to stand up, why we have to vote yes on Prop 50.
Thank you. So, Matt, why should voters not support Prop 50?
So I have 3 young girls, right? And, you know, every once in a while they do, fight a little bit. And inevitably one, pushes the other a little hard. Do I, as the parent, go in and say, well, she pushed you, so now go push her harder back? That's definitely what you should do. No, every parent, every person knows that that is not the principles by which we want to lead our county, by which we want to lead our state, or lead the nation. We don't want to be captivated by revenge and retribution and retaliation. We want to focus on what makes sense for Shasta County, for the state of California, and for representing the interests of the people in California. The Republicans have 25% of party registration across the whole state compared to 45%. That's less than a 2-to-1 margin. And yet we're saying through this that we're okay with Democrats having 92% of the members of Congress. That makes no sense. I mean, just basic math does not make any sense that you could have a party that has about 1/3 of the voters only get 8% representation in DC. It doesn't matter what Texas is doing. We can't control that. What we can control is our own destiny and whether we're going to live by our principles, and whether Shasta County wants to have a representative who comes up here and campaigns, who understands our issues, who goes up to Alturas and spends time on a cattle ranch, who knows what it's like to live in Northern California and can represent those interests in DC. And if this passes, invariably what's going to happen is our representative is not going to come up here for campaigns. They're not going to understand the nature of rural California, and they are going to be based in the Bay Area. And that is what the math shows, and it will perpetuate an uneven balance that already exists to the extreme in Shasta County, where a supermajority of one party has dominated state politics for 10 to 15 years. So vote no on this. Let's stick with our principles even when it gets hard. That's when principles matter the most. That's not when you abandon them. And let's stand up and focus on Shasta County and not get distracted by national political jargon. Thank you.
Rose, would you like to rebut anything that Matt said tonight?
Well, thank you, Mike. Indeed, when somebody tries to suppress your democracy, do you just sit back? No, you fight back. And that is what Prop 50 is about. It's our remaining weapon to fight against this brazen, corrupt political grab by President Trump and his billionaire buddies. President Trump was desperate. He knows his policies are not popular. Our lives have just gotten harder because of those policies. We can hardly afford groceries. Our families are crushed by debt, and we're at risk of losing not just our hospitals, but our health care. Prop 50 is our way of making sure that we can preserve political independence, Matt. It's not about, it's a principle too. Like our democracy is a principle and we need to fight for it. Whatever Texas does, it's not just isolated to Texas. Because they are going after congressional seats, what they are doing is affecting us here in California. And what they are doing is continuing that billionaire control that is suppressing ordinary working families like ours here in Shasta County. And that's why we have to fight. That's why we have to vote yes on Prop 50.
Thank you, Rose. Matt, you like to rebut anything that Rose said?
I think we've covered a lot of ground tonight. I guess the last thing I'll say is that we're voting yes on Prop 50 is stepping onto a slippery slope. It's basically throwing your principles to the side and saying, whatever Texas does, if we need to, follow suit on that, we'll do it. And I don't think that's the way we want to lead here in Shasta County. And I think obviously, if you're not in favor of Trump's policies today, you might be thinking, this is my one chance to push back on it, to fight, as Rose said. But here's what you're doing if you, and that's totally fine, but here's what you're doing if you vote yes on this as someone who doesn't like Trump's policies. You're playing the short game. You're taking a shortcut that's going to undermine the future of how we lead and how we govern as a nation, as a state, and as a county. And you're playing the short game. And so I'd say, I totally appreciate your frustration, but don't allow that to let you abandon your principles. Instead, play the long game, do it the right way, because that's how you will win voters in the long run, is by sticking to your principles, not abandoning them as soon as there's an opportunity to take a shortcut. Vote no on Proposition 50.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Rose. Thank you for watching tonight. My only piece of advice on November 4th, vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Rose.
Okay, thank you. How long did we take?